The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty yard as Maria Elena stepped out of the small farmhouse, her bare feet touching the cold wooden porch. She had learned to walk quietly, to move like a ghost through her own home. The house that was supposed to be her sanctuary had become her prison, and the people who were meant to be her family had become her tormentors. It had been 3 years since she married Carlos. 3 years since she left her small village in Mexico to join him in this remote corner of Texas. Back then, she had dreams of building a life together, of creating the family she had always wanted. Carlos had seemed different when he courted her, gentle and kind, full of promises about their future together, but those promises had crumbled like dust in the harsh Texas wind. The trouble began almost immediately after their wedding. Carlos lived with his parents, brothers, and sisters in the cramped farmhouse, and Maria Elena quickly discovered that she was not welcomed as a daughter but treated as an unwanted burden. His mother, Dolores, made it clear from the first day that Maria Elena would never be good enough for her precious son. His father, Roberto, looked at her with cold eyes that made her skin crawl. At first, the cruelty was subtle. Dolores would serve everyone else at dinner and leave Maria Elena's plate empty. Claiming she had forgotten, Roberto would assign her the hardest chores while his other daughters-in-law received lighter tasks. Carlos's brothers would make crude jokes about her appearance, her accent, her background. When Maria Elena complained to Carlos, he would shrug and tell her she was being too sensitive, that she needed to try harder to fit in. As months passed, the abuse escalated. Dolores began withholding food from Maria Elena for days at a time, claiming she was too fat, too lazy, too ungrateful. Roberto started taking away her clothes, saying she didn't deserve nice things until she proved herself worthy. The brothers grew bolder with their harassment, cornering her when Carlos wasn't around, making threats about what would happen if she complained. Maria Elena tried to fight back at first. She stood up for herself, argued with Dolores, refused to accept the treatment. But each act of defiance was met with worse punishment. They locked her in the root cellar for 2 days with no food or water. They burned her few personal possessions, including the letters from her mother back home. They told her that if she tried to leave, they would call immigration and have her deported. Even though she had married Carlos legally, the worst part was Carlos's betrayal. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her heart and future, stood by and watched as his family destroyed her piece by piece. Sometimes he even participated, slapping her when his mother complained about her cooking, or laughing when his brothers made jokes about her body. He had become someone she didn't recognize, someone cruel and heartless. The breaking point came on a cold February morning. Maria Elena had been sick for days with a fever, but Dolores refused to let her rest. She forced her to work in the barn, cleaning animal stalls and hauling heavy feed bags. Maria Elena collapsed twice, but each time, Roberto kicked her and told her to get up. When she finally finished her chores and stumbled back to the house, she found her belongings scattered across the yard. Dolores stood on the porch with her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face. "You're not welcome here anymore," she announced. "You've been nothing but trouble since the day you arrived. Carlos deserves better than a worthless girl like you." Maria Elena looked around desperately for Carlos, hoping he would intervene, hoping he would remember the love they once shared. But he was nowhere to be seen. Roberto appeared beside his wife, holding a bundle that Maria Elena recognized as her few remaining clothes. "These don't belong to you anymore," he said, his voice filled with malice. "Nothing here belongs to you. You came here with nothing, and you'll leave with nothing." He threw the bundle into the dirt at her feet, then pulled out a cigarette lighter. Before Maria Elena could react, he set fire to her clothes, her shoes, her small collection of photographs from home. She watched in horror as the flames consumed the last remnants of her old life, the smoke rising into the gray winter sky. "Please," she whispered, dropping to her knees. "These are all I have. Please don't do this." Dolores laughed, a sound as cold as the wind. "You should have thought about that before you disrespected our family. Now you have nothing, just like you deserve." The other family members gathered around to watch the spectacle. Carlos's brothers jeered and pointed, making jokes about her humiliation. His sisters-in-law whispered among themselves, some looking uncomfortable but none speaking up in her defense. Carlos himself finally appeared. But instead of helping her, he looked away in shame and disgust. "Get off our property," Roberto commanded, his voice booming across the yard. "And don't ever come back. If we see you here again, we'll call the sheriff and have you arrested for trespassing." Maria Elena remained on her knees, watching her possessions turn to ash. She felt something break inside her. Not just her heart, but her spirit. These people had taken everything from her. Her dignity, her belongings, her sense of safety, her hope for the future. They had stripped away not just her clothes but her identity, leaving her with nothing but shame and fear. As the fire died down, leaving only charred remains, Maria Elena slowly stood up. Her legs shook with weakness and shock, but something deep inside her sparked with defiance. She looked at each face surrounding her, memorizing their cruelty, their satisfaction at her suffering. She would not give them the pleasure of seeing her break completely. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying across the silent yard. Roberto stepped forward threateningly. "What did you say?" "I said this isn't over," Maria Elena repeated, louder this time. "You think you can destroy me, but you're wrong. I'm stronger than you think," Dolores cackled. "Look at you. You have nothing. No clothes, no money, no home, no husband. What are you going to do, girl?" Maria Elena looked at Carlos one last time, hoping to see some flicker of the man she had fallen in love with. But his eyes remained cold and distant. He had chosen his family over her, chosen their cruelty over their love. The marriage was over, had been over for a long time. And now she finally accepted it. She turned and walked toward the gate, her bare feet stepping carefully over the rocky ground. Behind her, she heard Roberto shouting warnings about never returning, heard Dolores's laughter echoing across the yard. But she didn't look back. She couldn't afford to show weakness now. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, empty and desolate under the overcast sky. Maria Elena had no destination, no plan, no resources. She was wearing only the thin dress she had put on that morning, and the February air cut through the fabric like knives. But she kept walking, one step at a time, away from the nightmare her life had become. As she walked, memories flooded her mind. She remembered her mother's warnings about marrying too young, about moving too far from family. She remembered her own stubborn confidence that love would be enough to overcome any obstacle. She had been so naive, so trusting, so hopeful. That girl seemed like a stranger now. The wind picked up, and Maria Elena wrapped her arms around herself for warmth. Her feet were already numb from the cold, and she knew she wouldn't survive long outdoors in these conditions. But where could she go? She had no friends in this area, no contacts, no support system. The family had isolated her completely, cutting off any connections she might have made. She thought about trying to reach her family back in Mexico, but she had no money for a phone call, no way to travel, no documentation that hadn't been taken from her. Roberto had confiscated her identification papers months ago, claiming they needed to be kept safe. Now she realized it had been another way to control her, to make escape impossible. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Maria Elena came to a crossroads. One path led toward town, but she knew she would find no help there. The local community was small and tight-knit, and Roberto had influence with many of the business owners. They would likely refuse to help her, or, worse, contact him to come collect her. The other path led into ranch country, toward the open range where cattle grazed and cowboys worked. It was more isolated, more dangerous, but it also offered the possibility of anonymity. Someone out there might help her without asking too many questions. She chose the ranch road, her decision guided more by desperation than logic. As darkness fell, she continued walking, guided only by starlight and the faint hope that somewhere ahead lay safety. Her feet were bleeding now, leaving small, dark spots on the dusty road. Her lips were chapped and her throat was dry. Every muscle in her body ached with exhaustion and cold. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Behind her lay only humiliation and cruelty. Ahead, unknown but possible salvation. She had lost everything that mattered to her, but she still had her life, still had her determination. They had tried to break her spirit, but deep inside, something fierce and unbreakable remained. The night grew colder, and Maria Elena began to shiver uncontrollably. She knew she was in serious danger now. Hypothermia could set in quickly in these conditions, and she was already weakened by days of illness and lack of food. But just as despair began to creep in, she saw something in the distance. A light. It was small and warm, flickering like a beacon in the darkness. As she got closer, she could make out the outline of a ranch house. Modest, but well-maintained. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could smell wood burning. It was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. Maria Elena hesitated at the gate, suddenly aware of how she must look. Barefoot, dirty, dressed in rags, clearly desperate. What would she say to whoever lived here? How could she explain her situation without sounding crazy? Would they believe her story? Or would they think she was a criminal, a drug addict, someone dangerous? But as she stood there shivering in the cold, she realized she had no choice. It was this house, or death by exposure. She had to take the chance, had to trust that somewhere in this harsh world, there was still kindness to be found. She pushed open the gate and walked slowly up the path to the front door. Her hand trembled as she raised it to knock. But before she could, the door opened. A figure stood silhouetted against the warm light from inside, tall and broad-shouldered, watching her approach. "Help me," Maria Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, I need help." And then her legs gave out, and she collapsed on the wooden porch, her strength finally exhausted. As consciousness faded, she heard a deep voice, gentle but strong, saying something about getting her inside, getting her warm. Strong arms lifted her, carrying her toward the light and warmth she had thought she would never feel again. In her last moments of awareness, Maria Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Safety. For the first time in so long, someone was helping her instead of hurting her. Someone cared whether she lived or died. As she drifted off, she clung to that feeling, letting it anchor her to hope when everything else had been stripped away. Maria Elena woke to the sound of crackling fire and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, she forgot where she was, her mind still trapped in the nightmare of her recent past. Then the memories came flooding back. The cruel laughter, the burning clothes, the endless walk through the cold night. She sat up quickly, panic rising in her chest, but gentle hands pressed her back down onto soft pillows. "Easy there," said a deep voice, calm and reassuring. "You're safe now. You had a rough night, but you're going to be okay." Maria Elena's eyes focused on the man sitting beside the bed. He was older than Carlos, maybe in his 40s, with graying hair and weathered hands that spoke of years of hard work. His face was kind but serious, with deep lines around his eyes that suggested both laughter and worry. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, nothing fancy. But everything about him seemed solid and dependable. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from thirst and exhaustion. "Name's Thomas Mitchell," he replied, offering her a cup of warm broth. "Tom, this is my ranch. You collapsed on my porch last night. Half frozen, and talking about needing help. Been worried about you all night." Maria Elena tried to sit up again, more carefully this time. She was wearing a large flannel shirt that clearly belonged to Tom, and thick wool socks that came up to her knees. Her own torn dress was nowhere to be seen. Panic flashed across her face. Tom noticed her distress immediately. "Your clothes were wet and muddy, so I had to get you into something warm and dry. My late wife's sister lives nearby, and she helped get you cleaned up and changed. Everything was proper, I promise. Sarah stayed here all night to make sure you were comfortable." Relief flooded through Maria Elena. After months of being treated like an object by Carlos's family, This stranger's consideration of her dignity meant everything. She accepted the broth gratefully, feeling the warm liquid soothe her raw throat. "What happened to you?" Tom asked gently. "You don't have to tell me if you're not ready. But someone hurt you pretty bad. That much is clear." Maria Elena hesitated. She had learned not to trust easily, not to reveal too much about her situation. But something in Tom's eyes made her feel safe, made her want to tell the truth. Slowly, carefully, she began to speak. She told him about Carlos, about the false promises and the gradual revelation of his true nature. She described the systematic abuse from his family, the way they had stripped away her dignity piece by piece. She explained about the burned clothes, the threats, the final humiliation that had driven her into the night with nothing. Tom listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire that warmed the small bedroom. "Those aren't people," he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Those are monsters. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not someone they're supposed to love and protect." "I don't know what to do now," Maria Elena admitted, tears starting to flow. "I have nothing. No money, no clothes, no place to go. I don't even have my papers anymore. They took everything." Tom stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the vast expanse of his ranch. The morning sun was painting the landscape in golden hues, and cattle dotted the distant pastures like small brown specks. It was peaceful here, quiet in a way that spoke of solitude rather than loneliness. "Well," he said, turning back to her, "first thing is, you need to get your strength back. Your skin and bones. And those cuts on your feet need proper care. After that, we can figure out what comes next." "I can't pay you," Maria Elena said quickly. "I don't have any money. And I don't know when I'll be able to get any. I can't take charity from a stranger." Tom smiled for the first time since she'd woken up, and it transformed his whole face. "Who said anything about charity? This ranch is a lot of work for one person. I could use some help around here, if you're willing to work." Over the next few days, Maria Elena began to understand what Tom meant. The ranch was indeed a lot of work. There were horses to feed and groom, chickens to tend, a large vegetable garden to maintain, and countless other tasks that kept the property running smoothly. Tom had been managing it all alone since his wife died 2 years earlier, and the strain was beginning to show. Sarah, Tom's sister-in-law, visited daily to check on Maria Elena and help with her recovery. She was a practical woman in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and no-nonsense attitude, but her kindness ran deep. She brought fresh clothes that had belonged to Tom's wife, explaining that Beth would have wanted them to be used by someone who needed them. "Beth was about your size," Sarah said, holding up a simple blue dress. "She always said clothes were meant to be worn, not to sit in closets collecting dust. She'd be happy knowing they're helping someone start over." As Maria Elena grew stronger, she insisted on beginning to work. At first, Tom was reluctant to let her do anything strenuous. But she was determined to earn her keep. She started with light tasks, collecting eggs from the chickens, helping in the garden, preparing meals. It felt good to be useful again, to contribute something positive instead of being treated like a burden. Tom was a patient teacher, showing her how to care for the horses, how to repair fencing, how to read the weather signs that predicted storms. He never raised his voice, never criticized her when she made mistakes, never made her feel stupid or worthless. After months of constant criticism and abuse, his quiet encouragement was like water in a desert. "You're a natural with the horses," he observed one afternoon as she groomed his favorite mare, a gentle chestnut named Bella. "They trust you. Animals can sense good people." Maria Elena smiled, running her hand along Bella's neck. "My grandfather had horses back in Mexico. I used to help him when I was little. I forgot how much I missed it." "Tell me about your family," Tom said, leaning against the stall door. "Do they know what happened to you?" The smile faded from Maria Elena's face. "I haven't been able to contact them since I got married. Carlos's family said it was too expensive to call Mexico, and they wouldn't let me write letters. They said I needed to focus on my new family now, not live in the past. Tom's jaw tightened. That's another way of controlling you. Cutting you off from people who love you, making you dependent on them. It's a classic pattern. You seem to know a lot about this, Maria Elena observed. Tom was quiet for a moment, his hand absently stroking Bella's nose. My sister went through something similar with her first husband. Took her years to get away from him. That's how I recognized the signs. What happened to her? She's doing well now, remarried to a good man, has 2 kids. But it was touch and go for a while. She stayed with me here for almost a year while she got back on her feet. He looked directly at Maria Elena. Point is, you can come back from this. It doesn't define you. As weeks passed, Maria Elena found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke before dawn to help with morning chores, spent her days working alongside Tom on various projects, and fell asleep each night, exhausted but satisfied. The work was hard but honest, and every completed task gave her a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. Tom proved to be excellent company. He was well-read despite his rural lifestyle, and they spent many evenings talking about books, about politics, about dreams for the future. He had traveled extensively in his younger days before inheriting the ranch from his parents, and his stories of distant places fascinated Maria Elena. You could travel again, she suggested one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. You could sell the ranch and see the world. Tom shook his head. This place is in my blood. My great-grandfather homesteaded this land, built the first house with his own hands. My grandfather expanded it. My father improved it. And Beth and I had plans to make it even better. His voice grew wistful. Besides, where would I go? This is home. What about Beth? Maria Elena asked carefully. She had noticed that Tom rarely mentioned his late wife, and when he did, it was with a mixture of love and sadness that suggested the loss was still raw. Cancer, Tom said simply. Fought it for 3 years, but it got her in the end. She was the strongest person I ever knew. Never complained, never gave up hope. Right until the end, she was planning improvements for the ranch, talking about the future like she'd be there to see it. I'm sorry, Maria Elena said quietly. She sounds like an amazing woman. She was. You would have liked her. And she would have liked you. Beth had a soft spot for people who were fighting against unfairness. She would have been proud of you for walking away from that situation, for refusing to let them destroy you completely. The conversation stayed with Maria Elena long after they said goodnight. She was beginning to understand that Tom carried his own pain, his own losses. His kindness to her wasn't just natural generosity. It was also a way of honoring his wife's memory, of continuing to do good in a world that had taken away the person he loved most. One morning in April, Maria Elena was working in the vegetable garden when she heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Fear shot through her immediately. She had lived in constant dread that Carlos or his family would find her, would come to drag her back or make good on their threats. She dropped her gardening tools and ran toward the house, where Tom was coming out of the barn. It's okay, he called to her, seeing her panic. It's just Sarah and her husband Mike. They come by sometimes to check on things, but as the vehicles got closer, Maria Elena could see that it wasn't Sarah's familiar truck. There were 2 cars, official-looking, and her blood turned cold. Through the windshield of the first car, she could make out Roberto's stern face, his eyes scanning the property like a predator searching for prey. Tom, she whispered, grabbing his arm. It's them. It's Carlos's family. They found me. Tom's expression immediately hardened. He gently but firmly positioned himself between Maria Elena and the approaching cars. Go inside, he told her quietly. Lock the doors and don't come out until I tell you it's safe. They'll hurt you, Maria Elena protested. You don't know what they're capable of. I can handle them, Tom said with quiet confidence. This is my land, and you're under my protection. They have no power here. The cars pulled up in front of the house, and Roberto stepped out of the first one, followed by Carlos and one of his brothers. They looked around the property with obvious disdain, taking in the well-maintained buildings and orderly pastures. Roberto's eyes fixed on Tom with immediate hostility. We're looking for someone, Roberto announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to intimidating others. A Mexican girl. About 25. Brown hair. About this tall. He held up his hand to indicate Maria Elena's approximate height. And you are? Tom replied calmly, not moving from his position near the porch steps. Roberto Vasquez. The girl is my daughter-in-law. She ran away from home, and we've been looking for her. We have reason to believe she might be hiding somewhere around here. Tom crossed his arms over his chest, his stance casual but unmistakably protective. Well, I haven't seen anyone matching that description. But even if I had, I'm not in the habit of discussing my guests with strangers who show up on my property uninvited. Carlos stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. She's my wife. She has no right to be anywhere without my permission. If you're hiding her, you're interfering with family business. Your wife, huh? Tom's voice was deceptively mild. Funny thing about wives. Generally, they stick around when they're being treated with love and respect. When they run away, well, that usually tells a different story. Roberto's face darkened dangerously. You don't know anything about our family or our business. That girl is unstable, probably dangerous. She might have told you lies, made up stories to get sympathy. The only thing I know, Tom replied, his voice growing harder, is that 3 men just drove onto my property without permission, making demands and threats. Now, I'm going to ask you politely one time to leave. After that, I stop being polite. We're not going anywhere until we search this property, Roberto declared. That girl belongs with her family, and we're taking her home. No, Tom said simply. You're not. The standoff stretched for several tense moments. Roberto clearly wasn't used to being defied, especially not by someone he probably saw as just another ignorant cowboy. His sons flanked him, trying to look intimidating. But Tom showed no sign of backing down. Finally, Roberto smiled. But it was cold and threatening. You're making a big mistake, friend. We have connections in this county. People who understand the importance of family values, of keeping troublemakers in line. You might find life gets pretty difficult for you around here. I've lived on this land for 47 years, Tom replied evenly. My family's been here for over a century. We've survived droughts, floods, economic downturns, and all kinds of difficult people. I think we can handle whatever you might have in mind. From inside the house, Maria Elena watched through the curtained windows, her heart pounding. She could see the tension in Tom's shoulders, could hear the controlled anger in his voice. Part of her wanted to go outside, to face Roberto herself, and tell him to leave Tom alone. But she knew that would only make things worse. Roberto made one more attempt. Look, we don't want any trouble. Just give us the girl, and we'll be on our way. You can go back to your quiet little life, and we can take care of our family business. There's no girl here, Tom said firmly. And even if there was, she'd be free to make her own choices about where she wants to be and who she wants to be with. That's what we call liberty in this country. Roberto's mask of civility finally slipped completely. You think you're smart, don't you? You think you can hide her forever? We'll be back, and next time, we might not be so friendly. You do that, Tom replied calmly. But when you come back, you better have a warrant or some other legal authority, because if you set foot on my property again without permission, I'll be within my rights to defend it. The threat hung in the air like gun smoke. Roberto stared at Tom for a long moment, clearly trying to decide whether to escalate the confrontation. But something in Tom's steady gaze must have convinced him that the rancher wasn't bluffing. He turned abruptly and stalked back to his car. This isn't over, he called out as he got behind the wheel. Yes, it is, Tom replied quietly, but his words carried across the yard with absolute certainty. As the cars drove away, leaving clouds of dust in their wake, Maria Elena emerged from the house on shaking legs. Tom turned to her, his face still hard from the confrontation but his eyes gentle with concern. You okay? He asked. Maria Elena nodded, though she was anything but okay. They'll be back, you know. Roberto doesn't give up when he wants something. Maybe, Tom acknowledged. But they can't just take you. This isn't Mexico, and it's not their property. Here, you have rights, and I have rights, and the law is on our side. You don't understand, Maria Elena said urgently. They have connections, like Roberto said. The local sheriff is Carlos's cousin. The judge who married us plays poker with Roberto every Friday night. They've been building influence here for years. Tom was quiet for a moment, considering this information. Then he smiled, and there was something almost fierce in his expression. Well then, he said, putting a protective arm around her shoulders, I guess we better make sure you're not just a guest here anymore. Time to make this official. What do you mean? Tom looked down at her, his eyes serious but kind. I mean, Maria Elena, that you're with me now. For real. And anybody who wants to hurt you is going to have to go through me first. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibility. Maria Elena looked up into Tom's face, searching for any sign that this was just another empty promise, another false hope that would crumble under pressure. But all she saw was steady determination and a warmth that made her heart race in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. You don't know what you'd be getting into. They'll make your life miserable. They'll find ways to hurt your business, your reputation, everything you've worked for. Tom's arm tightened around her shoulders. Let me worry about that. The question is, do you want to stay? Not just hiding out until you figure out what to do next, but really staying, building something here? Maria Elena felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. For the first time in years, someone was offering her a choice. A real choice about her own future. Someone was asking what she wanted instead of telling her what she had to accept. Yes, she said simply. I want to stay. Tom nodded as if he had expected that answer. Then we do this right. Tomorrow, we drive into town and see about getting you some proper documentation. If they've been holding your papers, we'll get new ones. We'll also stop by the courthouse and file for divorce. Carlos abandoned you, threatened you, allowed his family to abuse you. Any decent lawyer can get you free of him. What if they won't help me? What if Roberto's influence is too strong? Then, we go to the state capitol. Or the federal level. We keep going until we find someone who'll listen to the truth. Tom's voice was calm but absolutely certain. You're not going back to that life, Maria Elena. Not ever. That night, Maria Elena lay awake thinking about Tom's words. The idea of being truly free, of having her own identity back, seemed almost too good to believe. She had lived under Roberto's control for so long that the thought of making her own decisions felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The next morning, they drove to town in Tom's old pickup truck. Maria Elena wore one of Beth's dresses, a simple green cotton that made her feel almost pretty again. Sarah had helped her do her hair, pulling it back in a neat bun that looked professional and confident. Their first stop was the courthouse, where they met with a family law attorney named Janet Rodriguez. She was a small, fierce woman in her 30s who listened to Maria Elena's story with growing outrage. This is classic domestic abuse, Janet said bluntly. The isolation, the financial control, the threats, the psychological manipulation, and what happened at the end, with destroying your belongings and throwing you out without resources. That's criminal behavior. Can you help me get divorced? Maria Elena asked. I can do better than that, Janet replied. I can help you get a restraining order against all of them. Get your legal status straightened out. And make sure Carlos pays for what he's done. Texas takes domestic violence seriously, especially when there's a clear pattern of abuse. They spent hours in Janet's office, documenting everything that had happened. Maria Elena found it difficult to talk about some of the worst incidents, but Janet was patient and understanding, helping her work through each detail. Tom sat beside her throughout the entire process, offering silent support and occasionally squeezing her hand when the memories became too painful. I'll need witnesses, Janet explained. People who saw the abuse or its effects. Do you have anyone who can testify about your condition when you first arrived at Mr. Mitchell's ranch? Sarah was there, Tom offered. She helped take care of Maria Elena that first night. She saw the state she was in. And Dr. Morrison examined her, added Sarah, who had joined them at the courthouse. He documented the malnutrition, the injuries to her feet, the signs of prolonged stress and abuse. Janet nodded approvingly. Good. We'll also need to address your immigration status. Even though you were legally married, the fact that they confiscated your documents and threatened deportation suggests they were trying to use your status against you. Is that a problem? Maria Elena asked nervously. Not necessarily. You entered the country legally, and you were married to a U.S. citizen. We just need to get your paperwork sorted out and make sure you have proper documentation. I have colleagues who specialize in immigration law. We'll make sure you're protected. The legal process took several weeks, during which Maria Elena continued working on the ranch and slowly rebuilding her sense of self. She found that physical labor was healing in a way she hadn't expected. Every fence post she helped repair, every vegetable she planted, every horse she groomed was proof that she was capable, useful, valuable. Tom was endlessly patient with her recovery process. He seemed to understand that she needed time to trust again, to believe that someone could care about her without trying to control her. He never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. Never made her feel obligated because he had helped her. But slowly, inevitably, her feelings for him deepened beyond gratitude. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, treasuring the way he laughed at her jokes, feeling her heart skip when their hands accidentally touched during work. It was different from what she had felt for Carlos, more mature and steady, built on respect and shared values rather than just passion. The breakthrough in her legal case came from an unexpected source. One of Carlos's sisters-in-law, a quiet woman named Patricia, who had always seemed uncomfortable with the family's treatment of Maria Elena, reached out through Janet's office. She was willing to testify about what she had witnessed. She says the abuse was even worse than we documented, Janet reported during one of their meetings. Patricia kept a diary of incidents, she observed. She was too scared to speak up at the time, but she's tired of staying silent. Why is she coming forward now? Maria Elena asked. Apparently, Roberto tried to arrange a marriage for her teenage daughter with an older man, someone with a history of violence. Patricia realized that if she didn't speak up about what happened to you, the same thing might happen to her daughter. She's decided to break the cycle. The trial, when it came, was everything Maria Elena had feared it would be. Roberto and his family hired an expensive lawyer who tried to paint her as an ungrateful immigrant who had abandoned her family responsibilities. They claimed she had been unstable, promiscuous, lazy, and disrespectful. But Janet was ready for their tactics. She presented a clear timeline of abuse, supported by medical evidence, photographs of Maria Elena's condition when she arrived at the ranch, and testimony from Patricia and other witnesses. Most importantly, she let Maria Elena tell her own story, in her own words. They took everything from me, Maria Elena testified, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. My clothes, my papers, my dignity, my sense of self-worth. They made me believe I was worthless, that I deserved to be treated like an animal. But I'm not worthless. I'm a human being with rights and dreams, and the capacity to love and be loved. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for legal games, listened carefully to all the testimony. When Roberto's lawyer tried to argue that this was just a cultural misunderstanding, that different families had different ways of handling domestic disputes, she cut him off sharply. There is no culture on earth that justifies what this family did to this young woman, she said firmly. What I've heard described here isn't discipline or traditional values. It's systematic torture, designed to break another human being's spirit. The divorce was granted immediately, along with a restraining order that prevented Carlos and his family from contacting Maria Elena or coming within 500 feet of Tom's ranch. Carlos was also ordered to pay substantial damages for his role in the abuse, though Maria Elena doubted she would ever see that money. More importantly, her legal status was clarified and secured. With help from immigration specialists, she was able to obtain proper documentation and eventually apply for permanent residency on her own merits, not dependent on any marriage. But the real victory came when they walked out of the courthouse that day. For the first time in years, Maria Elena was truly free. She belonged to no one but herself, owed nothing to anyone except what she chose to give, had the legal right to make her own decisions about her life and future. "How does it feel?" Tom asked, as they stood on the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. "Terrifying," Maria Elena admitted. "But good. Really, really good." They drove home in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The ranch looked different to Maria Elena now. Not like a hiding place, but like a real home. She could see possibilities everywhere. Improvements to the garden, additions to the house, new projects they could tackle together. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Tom cleared his throat nervously. "I have something to ask you," he said, his usual confidence replaced by boyish uncertainty. Maria Elena turned to look at him, noting the way he was fidgeting with his coffee cup. "What is it?" "Well, you're free now. Really free. You could go anywhere. Do anything. You could travel. See the world. Start fresh somewhere completely different." He paused, staring out at the horizon. "But I was hoping you might consider staying here permanently, not as a guest or an employee, but as a partner. In the ranch, in life, in everything." Maria Elena felt her heart stop, then start beating again much faster than normal. "Tom, what are you saying?" He turned to face her fully, his eyes serious but hopeful. "I'm saying I love you, Maria Elena. I know the timing might not be perfect. I know you're just getting your life back together, but I can't imagine this place without you anymore. You've brought life back to this ranch, brought life back to me. I want to share everything with you, if you'll have me." She looked at this man who had saved her life, who had fought for her freedom, who had never asked for anything in return. She thought about how safe she felt in his presence, how respected and valued he made her feel, how their conversations could stretch for hours without either of them getting bored. "I love you too," she said softly. "But are you sure? I come with a lot of complications, a lot of baggage. There might always be people who judge you for being with me, who think you made a mistake taking in a Mexican woman with a messy past." Tom reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Let them judge. I've never cared much what other people thought. And I'm not starting now. Besides, you're not taking anything from me. You're adding to my life in ways I didn't even know I was missing." "What about Beth?" Maria Elena asked gently. "I would never want to compete with her memory or try to replace her." Tom smiled, and there was peace in his expression. "Beth would have liked you. She would have understood that love doesn't diminish by being shared, that honoring her memory means continuing to live and love and build something good in the world. She would want me to be happy, and she would want you to be safe and cherished." Maria Elena squeezed his hand. "Then yes. Yes to staying, yes to partnership, yes to whatever comes next." They were married 6 months later, in a simple ceremony on the ranch with Sarah and a few close neighbors as witnesses. Patricia came too, having left Roberto's family, and started a new life with her daughter in another state. She brought a gift, a hand-carved wooden cross that had belonged to Maria Elena's grandmother, something she had managed to salvage from the fire that destroyed her belongings. "I kept it hidden," Patricia explained. "I always hoped I'd be able to return it to you someday." As Maria Elena held the cross, feeling its familiar weight in her hands, she realized how far she had traveled from that terrible night when she had lost everything. She had gained so much more than she had lost: freedom, dignity, respect, love, and most importantly, herself. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Maria Elena's ideas for expanding the vegetable operation and adding a small farmer's market booth brought in extra income. Tom's patient teaching helped her develop skills she never knew she had. Together, they built something stronger than either could have created alone. Roberto tried to cause trouble a few more times, spreading rumors in town about Tom and Maria Elena, trying to interfere with their business relationships, but the community gradually came to see the truth. That Tom had found happiness again, and that Maria Elena was a hard worker who contributed positively to their small town. Years later, when reporters came to interview Maria Elena about her work advocating for domestic violence victims, they always asked about that night she collapsed on Tom's porch. What had made her keep walking when everything seemed hopeless? How had she found the strength to start over? "I think maybe I always knew that somewhere out there was a life worth living," she would tell them. "I just had to be brave enough to keep looking for it, even when it seemed impossible." And sometimes, when you're brave enough to ask for help, the right person is there to offer it. Tom would usually be nearby during these interviews, working in his garden or tending to his horses, letting her tell her story in her own words. But sometimes the reporters would catch him listening, and they would see the way he looked at his wife, with pride, with love, and with the satisfaction of a man who had made exactly the right choice when it mattered most. The ranch still sits in the same spot, overlooking the same rolling hills and endless sky. But it's fuller now, busier, alive with the sound of children playing in the yard, and the chatter of volunteer workers who come to help with the domestic violence support programs Maria Elena established there. She never forgot where she came from, or how close she had come to losing everything. But she also never let that experience define her limitations. Instead, she let it fuel her determination to help others find their own path to freedom and safety. Sometimes, late at night, when the work is done and the house is quiet, Maria, Elena, and Tom sit on their porch and remember that first conversation, when he had looked at her broken and desperate state and seen someone worth saving. When she had found the courage to trust one more time, to believe that not everyone in the world meant her harm. "You saved my life," she told him once. "No," Tom replied, putting his arm around her. "You saved your own life. You're the one who walked away, who refused to give up, who had the courage to start over. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." But Maria Elena knew better. She knew that kindness, real kindness, is never just a coincidence. It's a choice, made by people who understand that we all need saving sometimes, and that the measure of a person isn't whether they fall down, but whether they help others get back up. And every morning when she wakes up in the home they built together, surrounded by the life they created from nothing but determination and love, she remembers Tom's words from that first night. "You're with me now, not as possession, not as obligation, but as partnership, as choice, as the promise that some people really do mean what they say when they offer help." It had taken her years to understand what home really meant. Not a place where you're trapped, but a place where you're free to be yourself. Not people who control you, but people who support you. Not love that diminishes you, but love that helps you grow. She had found all of that here, in this quiet corner of Texas, with this steady man who had never asked her to be anything other than who she truly was. And every day, she chose to stay, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because this was where she belonged, where she was valued, where she was home.